In today's lesson on biogeochemical cycles, we'll look into the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen is a component of amino acids and urea. Amino acids are the building blocks of all proteins. Proteins comprise not only structural components such as muscle, tissue, and organs, but also enzymes and hormones essential for the functioning of all living things. Urea is a byproduct of protein digestion. We use the term organic nitrogen to describe a nitrogen compound that has its origin in living material. The nitrogen in protein and urea is organic nitrogen. Organic nitrogen can enter septic systems as bodily wastes, discarded food material, or as components of cleaning agents. To appreciate the intricacies of nitrogen loading to coastal waters, some understanding of how nitrogen reacts chemically in the environment may be useful. Nitrogen is an element that can combine with itself or with other elements to make different compounds. For instance, nitrogen gas N2 is a compound made when two nitrogen atoms form a chemical bond. It makes up 80% of the atmosphere, while oxygen gas O2 makes up a little less than 20% of the atmosphere. So nitrogen gas is very common and plentiful. However, only a specialized group of bacteria and industrial fertilizer manufacture can fix this largely inert compound into biologically useful nitrogen compounds. Fertilizer production now exceeds natural nitrogen fixation in making N2 available to the biosphere. Plants are called producers because they are able to use light energy from the sun to produce food or sugar from carbon dioxide and water. Animals cannot make their own food, so they must eat plants and/or other animals. They are called consumers. There are three groups of consumers. Animals that eat only plants are called herbivores, or primary consumers. Animals that eat other animals are called carnivores. Carnivores that eat herbivores are called secondary consumers, and carnivores that eat other carnivores are called tertiary consumers. Animals and people who eat both animals and plants are called omnivores. Then there are decomposers, bacteria, fungi, and even some worms, which feed on decaying matter. These decomposers speed up the decaying process that releases mineral salts back into the food chain for absorption by plants and nutrients. In a food chain, energy is passed from one link to another. When a herbivore eats, only a small fraction of the energy that it consumed by the plant food is turned into body mass. The rest of the energy is turned into waste or used by the herbivore to carry out normal life processes like movement, digestion, or even reproduction. Therefore, when a herbivore is eaten by a carnivore, it only passes a small amount of energy that it has received to the carnivore. Of the energy transferred from the herbivore to the carnivore, some energy will be wasted or used up by the carnivore. The carnivore then has to eat many herbivores to get enough energy to grow. Because of the large amount of energy that it lost at each link, the amount of energy that is transferred decreases each time. The further along the food chain you go, the less food and hence energy remains available. A biogeochemical cycle is a relatively complex representation of how matter flows within one or more ecosystems. This is not the cycling of energy, but the cycling of various nutrients since, much like energy, matter can be created nor destroyed, only changed. The nutrients in a biogeochemical cycle spend their time in three sections. The biological part of an ecosystem, in which they help various organisms inhabiting it complete their bodily functions and function properly. The geological part of the ecosystem, in which they are trapped inside sediments or underground. The chemical part of the ecosystem, in which they exist diluted in water or as vapor in the atmosphere. While a food web is a diagram to represent the movement of energy across biological populations, nutrients also rely heavily on other organisms to move across the world. For example, the detritivores help turn corpses and residues into usable nutrients for the plants to absorb with their roots. The plants are eaten by primary consumers, which pass on nutrients to them. The primary consumers are eaten by secondary consumers, and so on. In conclusion, much like in a transfer of energy, the role of a food web in a biogeochemical cycle is to show how the nutrients inside it are transferred into a biological community. Let's imagine this food web is taking place in a lake ecosystem. The unfixed nitrogen is fixed by bacteria inside the water. The nitrates are absorbed by the autotrophs producers first trophic level. These are algae, water lilies, and duckweed. Some plants aren't eaten and die decomposed by bacteria and sending the nitrates back to the plant. The autotrophs are eaten by crabs, goldfish, and catfish, which are heterotrophs, first-class consumers, secondary trophic level. Some of the first-class consumers are eaten and die, being decomposed by bacteria and sending the nitrates back to the plants. The first-class consumers are eaten by otters, beavers, and gulls, which are heterotrophs, second-class consumers, third trophic level. Some of the second-class consumers aren't eaten and die, being decomposed by bacteria and sending the nitrates back to the plants. The second-class consumers are eaten by a hawk, which is an apex predator and has no natural predator. These are heterotrophs, third-class consumer, third trophic level. The third-class consumers that die will decompose and spread their nitrates to the soil, which will bring them to the plants and restart the whole process. This method of transfer is the first step of the nitrogen cycle. As we already know, N2, the nitrogen found in the atmosphere, is completely useless to living organisms. Nitrogen fixation is the process in which this useless gas is taken and transformed into nutrients plants and animals and living organisms can use. There are three ways in which nitrogen fixation can happen: biologically, industrially, or through lightning. Biologically is the common process that occurs during a biogeochemical cycle. In this one, N2 propagates itself into the soil, in which nitrogen-fixing bacteria transform the N2 into ammonium ions, a nutrient that is used by plants. There are two main types of nitrogen-fixing bacteria, the free-living or the non-symbiotic, which include cyanobacteria or blue-green algae, and the mutualistic and symbiotic bacteria such as Rhizobia that is found in legumes. Industrially, it is commonly used to create artificial fertilizers. Throughout a process called Haber-Bosch, 450 million metric tons of fixed nitrogen are made each year. This process gathers N2 and combines it with hydrogen, H2, at elevated temperatures. The outcome is ammonia-rich fertilizers that allow plants to develop faster and much better. Through lightning occurs when lightning breaks apart N2 atoms in the atmosphere, allowing them to combine with oxygen and creating nitric oxides, NO. Then, when these enter to the soil along with rainfall, nitrates and ammonia are formed. This process occurs after the intervention of a food web. When producers and consumers die and excrete the wastes, the nitrogen compounds in the detritus are broken down by microorganisms or detritivores. This process's product is ammonia or ammonium ion, which are other nutrients suitable for plants. Assimilation is a process in which plants consume nitrogen in the form of ammonia or nitrates that are found in the soil. During nitrification, ammonium is converted into nitrate. This process consists of the oxidation of ammonium, which is caused by bacteria in the genus known as Nitrosomonas. Nonetheless, other genera, including Nitrosococcus and Nitrospira, some subgenera, Nitrosolubus and Nitrosobivrio, can also autotrophically oxidize ammonia. In the second step of nitrification, nitrate is transformed into nitrate by nitrate oxidizing bacteria. These bacteria include the most frequent Nitrobacter, although others such as Nitrospina, Nitrococcus, and Nitrospira can do the same oxidation. Nitrification is the last major transformation in the nitrogen cycle. This one consists on the conversion of nitrite back into nitrogen gases such as nitric oxide and N2 gases. The nitrification is caused by soil bacteria known as Pseudomonas, Ralstonia, Alcaligenes, Paracoccus, Rhodobacter, Rubivirax, Tauira, Burkholderia, Bacillus, and Streptomycetes. These bacteria are able to survive in environments without oxygen, which is why they have to consume nitrate instead. Oxygen tends to be depleted in soil environments due to the addition of large amounts of water that saturate the soil and do not permit the oxygen to propagate. The The nitrogen cycle is commonly affected by human activity. Although scientists are not capable of fixing nitrogen biologically, they are capable of doing it industrially. With a chemical method called the Haber-Bosch, the purpose of the latter is to use the fixed nitrogen for fertilizers usually used in lawns, gardens, and other agricultural fields. Additionally, levels of nitrogen are affected by human activity with the burning and combustion of fossil fuels. Both processes, fertilizers and fossil fuel burning, raise the amounts of compounds containing nitrogen in the atmosphere. Predictably, these actions have harmful effects. Firstly, the high levels of nitrogen in the atmosphere other than N2, like nitric acid or HNO3, contribute to the production of acid rain, and others such as nitrous oxide or NO2 are huge causes of the greenhouse effect. Furthermore, the use of artificial fertilizers containing nitrogen and phosphorus can lead to a process known as eutrophication. The excess fertilizers is prone to be washed off and arrive at different bodies of water like lakes, rivers, and streams due to surface runoffs. During eutrophication, the large levels of nitrogen and phosphorus in the fertilizers now in the water lead to an overgrowth of algae and other types of microorganisms. The issue with eutrophication is that it completely decreases the availability of oxygen in the body of water, all because the overpopulation of algae and microorganisms consume lots of it during cellular respiration. Consequently, the lack of oxygen leads to the death of several organisms living in the body of water affected, which results in low oxygen, species depleted areas called dead zones.